You got yourself knocked up, not my problem. 3 years later, the millionaire froze when he saw her with triplets. Hi, my beautiful family, heavenly God, I lift every woman in this family into your endless light. Bless her with a peace that holds her together on the hardest days, a strength that rises even when her heart is tired, and a love so pure it warms every soul around her. These women, my Lord, they are the quiet miracles of this earth, the mothers, the grandmothers, the sisters, the warriors who carry the world on their shoulders, yet still manage to smile. As Christmas approaches, wrap their homes in comfort, fill their nights with calm, and let their hearts feel the warmth of your presence. Replace every hidden tear with joy, every heavy worry with hope, and every silent prayer with a beautiful answer. Let blessings enter their doors like gentle snow, softly, quietly, but changing everything. May every woman reading this know her worth, feel cherished, and remember she is never unseen. She is a light, she is a blessing, she is a gift from heaven to this world. If your heart is true, like the video, if your love is real, write, I am with Mr. Peter. The ultrasound images trembled in Debbie Tolan's hands as she stood in the center of Donovan Miller's penthouse, the Miami skyline glittering behind her like a cruel promise of everything she'd never have. She'd rehearsed this moment for days, standing in front of her bathroom mirror, practicing different ways to say the words, imagining his surprise melting into joy, his strong arms wrapping around her, whispering that everything would be okay. They'd figure it out together. They always figured things out together. Instead, he stared at the images showing 3 tiny heartbeats with the expression of a man who'd just been served a death sentence. You got yourself knocked up, Donovan said, his voice flat and cold as winter steel. Each word landed like a physical blow. Not my problem. Debbie's breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. They'd been together for over 2 years, real years, not casual dating. She knew his morning coffee order by heart, double espresso with a splash of cream, no sugar. She knew the way he liked his shirts pressed with extra starch on the collars. She knew the dreams he shared at midnight when the world felt small and safe, when he talked about building something that mattered, something beyond his family's money. She knew which side of the bed he preferred, how he looked when he first woke up, the sound of his laugh when something genuinely surprised him. She knew him, or she thought she did. Donovan, please, these are your children, ours. We can figure this out together. Her voice sounded pathetic even to her own ears, begging for scraps of humanity from someone who'd already decided she deserved none. He turned away from her, pouring himself scotch from a crystal decanter, though it was barely noon. The ice clinked against the glass like small bones breaking. Figure what out? How you trapped me, how you thought getting pregnant would lock down a Miller. You're smarter than this, Debbie, or I thought you were. Guess I was wrong about that too. I didn't trap anyone. We were in love. We were building something real. You were convenient, he interrupted, and the words sliced through her like broken glass dragged across skin. Good company, great in bed. But love? Come on. Did you really think a hotel concierge would end up with someone like me? My mother would have a stroke. Hell, she'd have me committed for even considering it. The words kept coming, each one designed to diminish her, to make her small, to erase what they'd had. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Rochelle Miller swept into the penthouse like a storm system, her Chanel suit immaculate, her pearls probably worth more than Debbie made in a year, her eyes sharp as diamonds and twice as cold. She took one look at Debbie clutching the ultrasound images, and her lip curled in disgust that was almost artistic in its completeness. Is this the maid? Rochelle's voice could have frozen oceans. Donovan, why is the help still here during business hours? I thought we discussed boundaries with service staff. Not the maid, Mother. The mistake I'm currently correcting. Debbie's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the back of a leather chair that probably cost more than her car, trying to find air in a room that suddenly felt airless. Her vision was tunneling, everything going dark at the edges. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't the man she knew. This wasn't the man who'd held her during thunderstorms because she hated lightning, who'd stayed up all night when she had food poisoning, who'd said he loved her first. Rochelle's gaze fell on the ultrasound images, and something dark flickered across her perfectly made-up face. "What is that?" "Nothing important," Donovan said. But his mother moved like a predator, snatching the images from Debbie's shaking hands with manicured fingers that felt like claws. Her eyes widened fractionally, then narrowed to slits that held nothing but contempt. "Triplets!" Rochelle's voice was venomous enough to kill. "My God, you're not just trying to trap him, you're trying to trap him with a litter, like some desperate animal. How absolutely pathetic, how utterly predictable." "Mrs. Miller, please!" Debbie's voice broke on the words. "Don't you dare address me," Rochelle snapped, taking a step forward that made Debbie instinctively step back. "Women like you are all the same. You see a successful man and you think spreading your legs will guarantee you a lifestyle. Well, it won't. Not in this family. Not while I'm still breathing." Donovan pulled an envelope from his desk drawer, thick with cash that had probably been prepared before she even arrived. He'd known she was coming, had planned this entire scene. The realization made everything worse. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was premeditated. He tossed the envelope onto the coffee table like he was paying for takeout he didn't even want. $50,000. Take it. Sign the papers inside saying I owe you nothing and disappear from my life, permanently. If you refuse, my lawyers will prove you slept with half of Miami, and those bastards aren't mine. They'll drag your name through every courtroom and media outlet in Florida. Choose wisely, Debbie. This is the best offer you're going to get." Debbie stared at the money, at the man she thought she knew, at his mother, who looked at her like something stuck to the bottom of an expensive shoe. The room was spinning. 3 babies were growing inside her, depending on her, trusting her, and their father was buying his way out of their existence. "You know that's not true," she whispered. "You know these are your children. You know I've never been with anyone else. You know everything you're saying is a lie." "Do I?" Donovan's eyes were empty, stranger's eyes. "You could have been with anyone, Debbie. A woman like you working in a hotel, meeting wealthy men every single day. Who knows what you do on your breaks? Who knows who else you've been warming beds for?" The accusation was so vile, so completely unfounded, that Debbie actually laughed, a broken, desperate sound that came from somewhere dark and destroyed. "You're lying to yourself. You know exactly what we had. You know I was faithful. You're just too much of a coward to face what's real." Rochelle stepped forward with the grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime destroying people politely, and in a movement so quick Debbie barely registered it, the older woman ripped the ultrasound images in half. The sound was terrible, paper tearing, futures ending. Then she ripped them in half again and again until they were confetti. She dropped the pieces into a nearby trash can like they were yesterday's news, like they were nothing, like 3 beating hearts were garbage to be disposed of. "That's where this entire conversation belongs," Rochelle said with chilling calm. "Take the money before my son changes his mind, or we'll make certain you lose your job, your apartment, and any chance of a decent life in this city. We have that power, dear. We have connections you can't imagine. Test us if you'd like. See what happens to women who try to extort Miller men." Debbie's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the pen as she signed the papers. Each signature felt like signing away pieces of her soul. She took the envelope, held it against her chest like armor that wouldn't protect her from anything. Her voice, when it finally came, was steadier than she felt, harder than she knew she could be. "I loved you, Donovan. I thought you were different. I thought you were good. I thought you were worth believing in. Then you thought wrong." He was already pulling out his phone, already moving on, already erasing her. "Simone's waiting for me. We have dinner reservations at 8. Something inside Debbie shattered and reformed in the same instant, harder and sharper than before, forged in fire and humiliation. She looked him dead in the eye, and he actually flinched from what he saw there. "You'll regret this. Not because I'll make you, but because one day you'll realize what you threw away. And by then, you won't deserve us. You won't deserve to even speak our names. You won't deserve to breathe the same air." Rochelle laughed, the sound like breaking glass in an empty cathedral. "Dramatic little thing, isn't she? So emotional, so predictable. Donovan, darling, do call Simone. I'm sure she's wondering where you are. We can't keep quality waiting for trash." Debbie walked to the door, each step feeling like walking through concrete, with weights chained to her ankles. At the threshold, she paused but didn't turn around. She couldn't look at them anymore without being sick. "You threw us away like trash today. Remember that. Remember this moment. Because we're going to make you choke on that mistake. I'm going to build something so powerful that you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have had it all and you chose nothing." She heard Donovan's voice as the door closed behind her, casual and unconcerned. "Well, that's handled. What time is dinner, Mother?" "I'm starving." Outside the building, Debbie pressed herself against the cold glass exterior, the torn ultrasound pieces clutched in her fist. She'd picked them from the trash on her way out, too heartbroken to leave any piece of her babies behind, even ruined pieces. Cars rushed past on the street below. People walked by without seeing her, without knowing that someone's entire world was ending right there against that wall. The city was beautiful and brutal and completely indifferent to her breaking. She held the torn pieces against her belly, where 3 tiny hearts were beating, depending on her, trusting her with everything. "They threw us away like we were nothing," she whispered to them, tears streaming down her face, dripping onto her hands. "Like we were problems to be solved with money. But we're not nothing, we're everything. We're the future they're too blind to see. And I swear on everything I am and everything I'll become, they're going to regret this day. Not because I'll destroy them with hate, but because you 3 are going to be so extraordinary, so brilliant, so loved, that he'll spend the rest of his life knowing he missed it all. We're going to build something so powerful that his whole world will shake when he sees what we've become. I promise you that. I promise." The Miami skyline blazed in front of her, indifferent and glorious and full of possibility for people who had the strength to seize it. Debbie straightened her spine, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and started walking. Behind her, in that penthouse, Donovan was probably already kissing Simone, laughing about his close call, already forgetting the woman and the babies he'd just erased. But Debbie would never forget. She'd remember every word, every look, every moment of this day. She'd let it burn inside her like fuel, and she'd use it to build something that would last forever. Chapter 2. The blueprint. The cramped studio apartment smelled like instant noodles and determination, a strange combination that had become Debbie's entire world, her new normal in a life that no longer resembled anything she'd imagined. She stood at the single window overlooking a parking lot where broken glass sparkled like false promises under flickering streetlights, her hands pressed against her swollen belly where 3 babies shifted and kicked, reminding her every moment why giving up wasn't an option. Her body ached from her morning shift at the hotel where she'd once met Donovan, where every wealthy guest now reminded her of what she'd almost had. Her eyes burned from afternoon customer service calls, where she smiled through a phone line while dying inside. And she still had evening food delivery runs ahead of her, driving through Miami's expensive neighborhoods in her beat-up car, delivering meals to people who'd never know what it felt like to choose between gas and groceries. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore, something for people who had safety nets and family support and futures that looked brighter than their pasts. Rest was for people who weren't fighting for 3 lives simultaneously. She had nothing but hunger and a plan that seemed impossible most days and essential every moment. Donovan's money, his blood money, his guilt money, his shut up and disappear forever money, sat divided in envelopes taped inside her closet, hidden behind clothes she could no longer fit into, a secret fortune that felt like poison. Every dollar had a purpose. Nothing wasted. Nothing spent on comfort or convenience or any of the things she desperately wanted. Some for business courses she was devouring online during stolen moments between jobs, learning about luxury markets and wealth management from free videos and discounted programs. Some locked away for after the babies came, for the terrifying months when she wouldn't be able to work at all, when her body would be recovering and 3 infants would need everything. The rest for medical bills that were already piling up like accusations, like evidence of her failure to plan better, to be smarter, to somehow avoid this entire situation. She was doing everything right, and it still felt like drowning in slow motion, like fighting against currents that were stronger than her will. Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness, displaying luxury real estate portfolios, high-end vacation rental markets, wealth management strategies that seemed designed for people who'd never worried about money. While other pregnant women were decorating nurseries and reading books about childbirth, Debbie was studying the psychology of rich people, learning what made them spend, what made them trust, what made them come back for more. She was building something in her mind, something that would rise from these ashes like a phoenix made of ambition and fury and absolute refusal to stay broken. "The Eden Collection," she whispered to her reflection in the dark window, to the woman who looked back at her with hollow eyes and fierce determination. The name had come to her in a dream, one of the few dreams that wasn't a nightmare. Paradise, but exclusive. Beautiful, but forbidden to those who couldn't afford it. She'd create ultra-luxury vacation rentals for people exactly like Donovan, people with more money than humanity. And she'd be so good at it that he'd eventually hear her name whispered in the circles he traveled. He'd realize his mistake, but by then, it would be too late. By then, she'd be untouchable. The laptop screen shifted to another tab, one she visited when the loneliness became unbearable, when the walls closed in and she needed to remember why she was fighting. Donovan's engagement announcement in Miami Social magazine. His arm around Simone, both of them gleaming and perfect like polished weapons designed to cut anyone who got too close. The headline read, "Miami's most eligible bachelor off the market." She'd printed it, pinned it to her wall, not out of longing or heartbreak, but as a reminder. Every time she wanted to quit, every time the weight became too much, every time she wondered if she was destroying herself for nothing, she looked at that photo and remembered being thrown away. The memory was acid and fuel in equal measure, burning and propelling her forward simultaneously. Her phone buzzed with a food delivery request. She needed to move, needed to work, needed to keep pushing forward because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant falling apart. But the babies were pressing on her lungs and her back was screaming and she had months left until they came. Months of this impossible juggling act, this unsustainable pace, this life that felt like punishment for loving the wrong person. She allowed herself 30 seconds of despair, of wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake keeping them, if Rochelle was right that she was pathetic and desperate and doomed to fail. 30 seconds to cry and rage and feel sorry for herself. Then the 30 seconds ended, as they always did. She grabbed her delivery bag and headed for the door, wiping her face, swallowing the pain, becoming the version of herself that could survive another day. The delivery took her past the hospital where she'd registered for prenatal care, the cheapest option available, the place where doctors looked at her with a mixture of pity and judgment. She'd be giving birth there soon, alone, surrounded by strangers who didn't know her story. No one to hold her hand through contractions, no one to tell her she was strong when she felt weak, no one to meet the babies when they arrived, to say they were beautiful and perfect and wanted. The thought was so heavy she had to pull over in a parking lot, had to let herself cry in the darkness of her car for just a moment, just long enough to release the pressure before it exploded. Then she wiped her face, checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, and finished the delivery. She was building something. The pain was temporary. The victory would be forever. It had to be. Weeks bled into each other, marked only by the growing mountain of her belly and the growing stack of completed coursework. She studied luxury brand marketing while her feet swelled so badly she couldn't fit into any shoes, except cheap flip-flops. She learned about property management while experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions that made her think labor was starting weeks early. She networked in online forums for high-end travel consultants while eating cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row because it was cheap and required no cooking, and she was too exhausted to care about nutrition. Every sacrifice brought her closer to something. She didn't know what yet, but she could feel it building, could sense the future taking shape, even though the present was unbearable. Then her water broke during a morning hotel shift, while she was refilling guest amenity baskets in a suite that cost more per night than she made in a week. The first contraction hit like a fist to her core, like something inside her was being torn apart. Her co-worker found her on the bathroom floor, trying to breathe through the pain, trying to call a cab because she couldn't afford an ambulance, trying to stay conscious while her body tried to bring 3 babies into a world that didn't want them. The hospital was chaos and pain and fear wrapped in fluorescent lighting that made everything look like a nightmare. No one held her hand. No one told her she was doing well. Medical staff came and went, efficient and distant, treating her like a case number instead of a person. She labored alone for hours that felt like years, hours where she wondered if she'd die here, if her babies would die, if this was her punishment for believing in love. When they finally came, Lauren first, tiny and furious, screaming her way into the world like she was angry at the universe for her circumstances. Then Erin, quiet and watchful, studying everything with ancient eyes that seemed to see more than any newborn should. Finally Mac, strong and struggling, fighting for every breath in a way that made the doctors move faster. Debbie forgot about Donovan. She forgot about revenge. She forgot about pain and fear and exhaustion. She forgot about everything except these 3 perfect, impossible beings that were suddenly her entire universe. They were so small, so vulnerable, so utterly dependent on her not failing. She'd created 3 humans who needed her to be stronger than she felt, braver than she was, better than she believed she could be. A nurse, exhausted from a double shift and barely looking at Debbie, asked the mandatory question without looking up from her clipboard. "Father's name for the birth certificates?" Debbie looked at her 3 babies lying in their warming beds, at their perfect fingers and their delicate eyelashes, and their complete trust that she would keep them safe from everything that could hurt them. "He died," she heard herself say, the lie coming easier than expected. "Car accident, before they were born. It's just us now." The nurse made a note, expressed hollow sympathy that meant nothing, and moved on to the next patient. And just like that, Donovan was erased. Not legally, she'd signed papers that removed him anyway, but narratively. In the story she'd tell her children, in the life she was building brick by brick, he simply didn't exist. It was cleaner this way, easier, less explaining about abandonment and rejection and not being wanted. They'd grow up thinking they lost a father to tragedy, not cruelty. It seemed kinder. It seemed survivable. Back in her studio apartment, the 4 of them crammed into a space meant for one. Debbie set up her laptop next to the single crib they shared because she couldn't afford 3. She'd learned to nurse them one-handed while typing with the other, to send professional business emails while covered in spit-up and functioning on 2 hours of sleep in 3 days. She sent out her first pitch email to a luxury property owner in the Bahamas while Lauren screamed and Erin fussed and Mac slept through it all like the chaos didn't exist, like he'd already learned to survive by tuning out the noise. On her wall, above the printed engagement announcement, she added a new piece of paper. 3 names in her handwriting: Lauren, Erin, Mac. Below them, she wrote in marker that bled through the paper: Phase 1, survive. Phase 2, build. Phase 3, make him understand what he lost. She studied that paper every night before sleeping, memorizing it like a prayer, or a curse, or a promise to the universe. This wasn't about revenge. This was about creating something so extraordinary that his absence became his punishment. He'd rejected them before they were born. She'd make sure they became people he desperately wished he'd known. Her first client response came at 3 in the morning, while she was changing diapers and crying from exhaustion and wondering if she'd survive the night. The property owner in the Bahamas was interested, wanted to discuss details, wanted to see her portfolio, which didn't exist yet, She didn't have a portfolio. She didn't have references. She didn't have anything except audacity and desperation, and 3 reasons to succeed that were currently sleeping in a crib held together with determination. She crafted a response that was confident and capable, and gave no hint of the chaos behind it, the unwashed hair and the crying babies and the bank account that was dwindling faster than she could replenish it. She proposed a partnership structure where she'd manage everything: marketing, bookings, guest services, in exchange for a significant cut of the revenue. It was bold, it was risky, it was exactly what someone with nothing to lose would propose. The owner said yes. Debbie stared at the email confirmation, at this tiny crack in the door, at this impossible beginning, and felt something shift in her chest. Not hope exactly, something harder, something more dangerous, something that felt like the future finally starting. She looked at her sleeping children, at her prison of a studio apartment, at the engagement photo of Donovan looking happy without her, and whispered to all of it, "Watch us rise. Watch us become something you never imagined possible. This is just the beginning." Chapter 3. The Collision. The luxury real estate mixer hummed with expensive conversations and carefully curated ambition, everyone dressed to signal success while desperately hunting for more of it, like addicts chasing their next high. Debbie moved through the crowd like she belonged there, which was its own kind of magic, considering that months earlier she'd been delivering food in a beat-up car while heavily pregnant. Now she wore elegant simplicity, a dress she'd found on clearance but wore like couture, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed new money or desperation. She'd learned in her rapid education that real wealth whispered. She'd learned how to whisper back in their language. The Eden collection had grown from one property to several, each acquisition strategic and slightly miraculous. The kind of growth that made people ask questions she didn't want to answer. She didn't own the properties, couldn't afford to, but she'd mastered the art of partnership, of convincing owners that her management would transform their investments into something extraordinary. And she'd been right every time. Her bookings were solid, her reputation was building. She was becoming someone people mentioned at gatherings, exactly like this one, someone who'd appeared from nowhere and was making waves. Then she saw him across the room, and time performed tricks she didn't know were possible, slowing down and speeding up simultaneously. Donovan Miller, pristine in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, laughing with a group of developers like he didn't have a care in the world, completely at ease in this world he'd been born into. Next to him was a woman who had to be Simone, all angles and elegance and the particular confidence that came from never having worried about money, never having been afraid, never having been thrown away like garbage. They looked like magazine people, glossy and untouchable. They looked exactly like the kind of couple Rochelle Miller would approve of, would parade around at events, would use to prove the family's good taste. They looked perfect. Their eyes met through the crowd. She watched recognition slam into him like physical force. His face went pale. His drink nearly slipped from his hand. His whole body went rigid like he'd been electrocuted. Good. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him wonder what she was doing here, in his world, wearing confidence like armor he couldn't penetrate. She didn't look away, didn't smile, didn't give him anything, just held his gaze until he broke first, until he turned to whisper something urgent to Simone. He approached slowly, navigating through the crowd like she might detonate if he moved too quickly or said the wrong thing. "Debbie?" She turned to him with practiced ease, as if running into ex-lovers at business events was something she did regularly, as if this moment wasn't costing her everything to maintain composure. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The question clearly struck him harder than she'd expected. She watched pain flicker across his face before he masked it. "It's me, Donovan." She let recognition dawn slowly on her face, theatrical and deliberate, giving him nothing real. "Donovan, right. From years ago. How interesting to see you here." Her voice was pleasant, neutral, giving away nothing of the war happening inside her chest. Simone materialized at his side like a protective spirit, territorial and suspicious in the way of women who sensed threats. Her eyes catalogued everything about Debbie in seconds, the dress, the shoes, the jewelry, the way she held herself, looking for weaknesses and finding none. "Baby, who's this?" "Old acquaintance," Debbie said smoothly before Donovan could respond, taking control of the narrative. "We dated briefly before he figured out what he really wanted. Congratulations on your engagement, by the way. I saw the announcement in Miami Social. You make a beautiful couple. Really, quite stunning together." Simone's suspicion didn't quite fade, but she softened fractionally, accepting the compliment as her due. "Thank you. How do you two know each other exactly?" "Hotel industry," Debbie said, which wasn't technically a lie. "I was working at the Meridian when we met. Seems like a lifetime ago now. Different people, different lives." Donovan found his voice finally, though it came out rough, damaged. "How have you been? What are you doing now?" "Exceptional, actually. I'm building a luxury vacation rental brand, the Eden Collection. Perhaps you've heard of it." She knew he had. She'd made sure her marketing targeted his exact circles, his clients, his world. His eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning. He had heard of it. "That's you? I've heard people mention it. Several people. Supposed to be very exclusive, impossible to book." "It is. We're very selective about our properties and our clients. Quality over quantity, always. We're building something that lasts, not just something that makes quick money." The implication hung in the air, unlike your family's approach. She sipped her champagne, letting the moment stretch uncomfortably, watching him squirm. "But I should mingle, potential clients to meet, lovely seeing you both. Truly, I hope married life treats you well, Donovan. I hope you get everything you deserve." She started to turn away, but Donovan's hand shot out, almost touching her arm before he caught himself, remembering they were in public. "Wait, can we talk? Maybe somewhere private?" Simone's eyes narrowed dangerously. Debbie's smile was polite ice, the kind that left frostbite. "I don't think that's appropriate, do you? You have your life. I have mine. Let's keep them separate. Cleaner that way." "I just want to know—" He lowered his voice, glancing at Simone, who was watching like a hawk protecting territory. How have you really been?" Debbie understood exactly what he was trying to ask without asking, what he didn't dare say in front of his fiancée. She leaned in close, so close she could smell his expensive cologne, close enough that only he would hear her next words, close enough to make Simone intensely uncomfortable. "They're beautiful, brilliant, perfect in every way imaginable, and they'll never know your name. You made sure of that." She pulled back and watched the words hit him like bullets, watched him process what she'd just confirmed. His face went through several expressions at once: shock, grief, something that might have been longing or might have been regret. She didn't wait for his response. She walked away, back straight, head high, leaving him frozen in the middle of the party like a statue of his own failures. For the rest of the evening, she felt his eyes on her constantly, tracking her movements. He was watching her network, watching her command conversations with developers and property owners, watching her be successful and confident and completely fine without him. She made sure he saw her laugh with potential clients, saw her exchange business cards with the wealthy and connected, saw her belong in this world he probably thought she'd never access. When she left 2 hours later, she didn't look back once. But in her car, hands shaking on the steering wheel like she had tremors, she allowed herself one moment of absolutely falling apart. Seeing him had torn open wounds she thought had scarred over into something manageable. He looked good, healthy, happy, unbothered by everything he'd done, like walking away from her, and 3 babies had cost him nothing but a few signatures and some cash. Meanwhile, she was barely holding together, every day a battlefield, every victory won by fighting through exhaustion and fear and the constant terror of not being enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from her nanny. Mac was running a fever, nothing serious probably, but he wanted his mama. She wiped her face roughly, started the car and drove home to her real life. The life that mattered, the life Donovan had chosen to miss, had chosen to erase, had chosen to pretend didn't exist. That night, after Mac's fever broke and all three babies were asleep in their shared crib, she searched Donovan's name online against her better judgment. Found society photos from his engagement party, everyone beautiful and wealthy and unburdened. Found business articles about his company's expansion. Found absolutely no mention of abandoned children or the woman he'd destroyed. His life was pristine, perfect, untouched by consequences. The universe wasn't fair. Karma wasn't real. Bad people won all the time. She opened her laptop and sent emails to 3 more property owners, pitching partnerships with renewed fury. She updated the Eden Collection's website with new testimonials from satisfied guests who'd paid premium prices for exclusive experiences. She researched Donovan's client base with surgical precision and targeted them specifically with her marketing, stealing from him piece by piece. If he wanted to pretend she didn't exist, fine. She'd become impossible to ignore. She'd be everywhere he looked. Just before dawn, another email arrived, one that made her heart stop. A major property owner in Turks and Caicos, someone whose portfolio would change everything for her business, someone who could make her legitimate instead of just surviving. They'd heard about the Eden Collection through channels that mattered. They wanted to meet. They were interested in a partnership that would be, in their words, potentially transformative for both parties. Debbie read the email 3 times, 4 times, making absolutely sure it was real and not some exhaustion-induced hallucination. This was big, bigger than anything she'd landed before. This was the kind of client that would put her on the map permanently, that would make her inarguably successful instead of just scraping by. This was phase 2 of her plan, manifesting faster than she'd dared hope. She walked to her children's room, watched them sleep in the pre-dawn light filtering through cheap curtains. Lauren sprawled like she was claiming territory even in sleep, already fierce, already fearless. Erin curled into herself, peaceful and contained, already thoughtful, already wise. Mac clutching his stuffed soccer ball like it might escape if he loosened his grip. These were her reasons. These were her victories. These were the humans Donovan would never know, and that was his loss, his failure, his punishment. "He saw us tonight," she whispered to them, her voice barely audible. "He saw what we're becoming, and it scared him. I could see it in his eyes. Good, we're just getting started." Chapter 4. The Investigation. Donovan Miller sat in his downtown office staring at search results on his computer screen, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, trying to reconcile the woman from last night with the woman he'd thrown away. The Eden Collection wasn't just some side project or hobby business. It was a legitimate, growing enterprise with impressive revenue and even more impressive buzz in luxury travel circles that mattered. Articles called Debbie the mysterious force behind Miami's most exclusive vacation experiences. One headline read, "Single mother builds empire from nothing." His hands were shaking. He couldn't seem to stop them from shaking no matter what he did. Single mother, of triplets. The timeline matched perfectly. The ages would be right, unless she'd met someone else immediately after him, gotten pregnant immediately with someone else's triplets, which seemed statistically impossible. These were his children, had to be his children. 3 human beings walking around Miami with his DNA, being raised by a woman he'd called convenient and disposable, a woman he'd paid to disappear. 3 children he'd actively rejected, had signed papers to erase, had given money to make not exist. He'd actually handed her cash to abort his own children from his life, and instead she'd used it to build something that was now competing directly in his world. He'd tried to sleep after the mixer, but Simone noticed his distraction immediately. She was perceptive when it came to threats, had been trained by her socialite mother to spot competition. She'd asked about the woman from the party, the one who'd looked at him like he was fascinating and disappointing simultaneously, like he was a specimen to be studied. He'd said old friend, nothing important, ancient history. Simone hadn't believed him. She'd gone quiet in that particular way that meant she was filing information away, building a case she'd present later when the timing was perfect for maximum damage. Now, alone in his office at dawn, unable to sleep or think about anything else, he did what he swore he wouldn't do. He hired a private investigator, gave them Debbie's name and her business, told them he needed comprehensive information, living situation, business details, family structure, financial status, everything. The investigator didn't ask why, which meant they'd done this kind of thing before. They just named a price that was absurd, and Donovan paid it without blinking because he needed to know. He needed to confirm what his gut was screaming at him, what that look in her eyes had told him last night. The report arrived 3 days later, and reading it felt like watching his own execution in slow motion, each detail another nail in his coffin. 3 children, Lauren, Erin, Mac. Born exactly when they should have been born if they were his, if the timing matched their relationship, if biology followed its inevitable course. Birth certificates listed no father, cause stated as deceased in car accident. She'd actually told people he was dead. The cruelty of that struck him as both deserved and devastating. In her world, in her story, in the narrative she'd constructed for their children, he literally didn't exist. He was less than nothing. He was an absence explained by tragedy instead of choice, which was somehow kinder than the truth. The report detailed her business growth with clinical precision, her financial situation improving from desperate to stable to actually impressive. It included photos from various events, her at conferences looking professional and powerful, her at networking dinners being treated like she mattered, her being successful and confident, and one photo taken from distance with telephoto lens by an investigator who'd thought Donovan would want confirmation of her at a park with 3 children. He stared at that park photo until his eyes burned and watered. 2 girls and a boy, probably around 4 years old based on when they were born, playing on swings while Debbie watched from a bench. She was smiling at them the way he'd never seen her smile at anything else, completely unguarded, purely joyful, like they were the only thing in the universe that mattered, like she'd burn the world down to keep them safe. The boy looked like Donovan's father in childhood photos, same jaw structure, same build, same way of standing. The resemblance was impossible to miss, undeniable, damning. That night, Simone went through his phone while he was in the shower, and he'd been careless enough to leave it unlocked. Found the PI report, found the photos, found the evidence of his secret investigation. When he came out, she was sitting on the bed holding his phone like it was evidence in a murder trial, and maybe it was. "You have 3 children," she said quietly, not a question, not even really surprised. A statement of fact she'd already processed. He could have lied, should have lied, could have deleted the report, could have been more careful, could have maintained the fiction. Instead, he sank onto the bed next to her and told her everything. The pregnancy, the money, the papers Debbie signed, his mother's involvement and encouragement, the complete abandonment, the deliberate erasure. Simone listened without interrupting, her face cycling through expressions he'd never seen before, shock, disgust, something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. "You paid her to make your children disappear," Simone said when he finished, her voice hollow. "Like they were a problem you could solve with money, like they were pests to be exterminated." "I was different then." "Were you?" She stood up abruptly, started pacing the bedroom like a caged animal. "Or did you just not face consequences until now? How long have you known she was back in Miami? How long have you been investigating her? How long have you been lying to me?" "I saw her a few days ago, at the business mixer. She's the one who started the Eden collection. I didn't know before then." Simone laughed, sharp and bitter and completely unlike her usual measured tones. "The company that's been taking clients from you, the one everyone's talking about like it's the next big thing, that's her, the woman you abandoned while pregnant with triplets?" She pressed her hands to her face. "Do you realize how insane this is? Do you understand what kind of person you've revealed yourself to be?" I was young, I was scared. You were cruel, Simone interrupted, and the word landed between them like something physical, like a blow. You weren't some confused kid. You were a grown man who made a choice. You chose convenience over children. You chose your mother's approval over basic human decency. You chose to be a monster and you never looked back. He tried to defend himself, tried to explain the pressure he'd been under from his family and society, tried to make her understand that he genuinely believed it was the right choice at the time, that he'd thought he was doing everyone a favor. But every word out of his mouth sounded weaker than the last, more pathetic, more obviously wrong. Simone listened with growing horror, like she was meeting him for the first time and hating what she saw, like all the polish had been stripped away and she was looking at something ugly underneath. I need time to think, she finally said, her voice cold and final. I need to figure out if I can marry someone who did this, who is capable of this level of cruelty. Simone, please. Do they know, she asked suddenly, your children, do they know you exist? She told them I died, car accident, before they were born. Simone's laugh was broken glass wrapped in disbelief. Good, that's kinder than the truth. At least dead fathers get the benefit of the doubt. At least they're not choosing to be absent every single day. At least they tried. She grabbed her coat from the closet. I'm staying at my sister's tonight. Don't call me. I'll call you when I've decided if we have a future, if I can even look at you again. She left. The apartment felt enormous and empty, every surface reflecting his failure. Donovan poured himself scotch and stared at the park photo again until the image burned into his retinas. His children, 3 people he'd never met, who were growing up believing he was dead, which was somehow worse than them knowing the truth. At least hatred was something, was a connection, was proof you'd existed in someone's life. Being forgotten was nothing. Being erased was complete. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Miami real estate heir's secret children scandal. Someone had leaked it. Maybe Simone in anger. Maybe the PI covering their bases. Maybe Debbie herself deciding it was time, though that seemed unlike her. The article had few details, but enough to start conversations, enough to make his phone start ringing off the hook. His business partners would see this. His mother would see this. Everyone he'd ever known would know what he'd done. Within an hour, calls started coming in like an avalanche, colleagues asking for comment, his mother demanding he fix this immediately, her voice sharp with fury, business associates suggesting he prepare statements and hire crisis management, his lawyer wanting to discuss potential liability issues. Everyone had an opinion about his disaster. No one asked if he was okay, no one asked about the children or what they needed. At midnight, drunk enough to be stupid, he sent Debbie an email, just one line. I know they're mine and I'm sorry. She responded an hour later, just as brief, just as cutting. Your apology means nothing. Stay away from my family. Her family, not our children, not the kids, not even them. Her family. She'd drawn a line around them that completely excluded him, and he had no right to cross it. He had contributed biological material and nothing else. In every way that mattered, he was a stranger who donated DNA. The reality of that settled into his bones like cold. The next morning, Simone called. Her voice was distant, formal, already gone even though she hadn't said the words yet. I can't marry you. I can't build a life with someone who walked away from his own children. My brother has been stealing from your company, and I've known for months, and I didn't tell you because I was protecting him. But you know what? You're worse than him. At least his damage can be fixed with money and jail time. What you did, there's no fixing that. That's permanent. The call ended. Donovan sat in his empty office in his family's building, surrounded by generations of Miller success, and realized he'd achieved everything his parents wanted except the things that actually mattered. He had money. He had status. He had his mother's conditional approval, and he had absolutely nothing that made any of it worthwhile. He pulled up the Eden Collection's website, studied Debbie's professional photo in the About section. She looked powerful, complete, like someone who'd survived something terrible and decided to become extraordinary instead of broken. He'd done that to her. He'd forced her to choose between destroying herself or becoming invincible, and she'd chosen invincible, which meant she'd never forgive him. Why would she? He wouldn't forgive him either. Chapter 5. The Twist of the Knife. The conference room in Donovan's building felt different now that he knew he was losing it piece by piece, now that the walls seemed to close in with inevitability. The quarterly board meeting had the atmosphere of a funeral, everyone pretending things were fine while knowing the patient was dying, while watching the monitors flatline. His company, his family's company, generations of Miller success built on ruthless business practices and questionable ethics, was being systematically dismantled by forces he couldn't quite identify, couldn't quite fight, couldn't quite escape. His CFO delivered the news with the tone of someone reading a death certificate, clinical and final. The hostile takeover is real. We've confirmed a buyer group has acquired enough shares to force significant changes. They'll have majority control by end of quarter unless we find alternative financing immediately. And frankly, no one's willing to invest right now, given the publicity around your personal situation. Donovan's head was pounding, vision blurring at the edges. Who's behind it? The CFO slid a folder across the table with the air of someone delivering a diagnosis. Primary investor is the Eden Collection. They've partnered with Torres Hotel Group. Combined, they have substantial capital and strategic leverage. They want your coastal properties specifically. Everything else is just pressure to make you sell what they actually want. The room tilted slightly. Everything came into sharp, terrible focus. Debbie. This was Debbie. She wasn't just building her own empire, she was actively destroying his with surgical precision. This was strategic warfare disguised as business, revenge wrapped in legitimate corporate action. She'd studied him, identified his weaknesses, and was now exploiting them with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years planning this exact scenario. His lawyer spoke up, trying to sound optimistic and failing miserably. We can fight this, file injunctions, contest the share acquisitions, make it expensive and difficult for them to continue. Or, the CFO interrupted, his tone suggesting he'd already made his preference clear, we could negotiate. They've indicated willingness to walk away from the takeover if we sell them the properties they actually want. It's not a terrible deal, financially speaking. We'd lose those assets but keep the company. Donovan laughed, surprising everyone, including himself. The sound was bitter and broken. She's giving me an out. How generous. How kind of her. His mother, attending via video conference because she couldn't be bothered to come in person anymore, spoke from the screen with her usual venom. Who is she? And why does this sound personal rather than professional? Debbie Tolan, the woman I got pregnant and paid to disappear, the one with my triplets who I refuse to acknowledge. Apparently she's decided to take everything I have as compensation for what I took from her. Fair trade, really. The room went completely silent. Even his mother, usually impossible to shock, looked stunned. This is about those children? She's destroying the family business over ancient history? That's insane. Ancient history? Donovan repeated flatly, tasting the words. Is that what we're calling abandoning 3 babies? Ancient history that doesn't matter anymore? Rochelle's face hardened on the screen, her eyes going cold. Don't you dare take that tone with me. I advised you on a difficult situation. This woman is clearly unstable, using business as revenge, weaponizing capitalism. Or she's just better at it than I am, Donovan interrupted, and the admission felt like freedom and defeat simultaneously. She built something from nothing while raising 3 kids alone. I inherited everything and I'm losing it because I made enemies of people I should have loved. Maybe she's not the unstable one in this scenario. Maybe I am. His mother's face went purple with rage, her perfectly applied makeup cracking slightly. We'll discuss your attitude later, young man. For now, fix this. Pay her whatever she wants. Make this go away like you were supposed to years ago. The call ended abruptly. Donovan sat with his board members, all of them looking at him like he'd revealed himself to be fundamentally broken, irreparably damaged. Maybe he had. Maybe that's what this whole disaster was showing him, that success built on cruelty eventually collapsed, that money couldn't actually solve problems when the problems were human beings with feelings and memories and the capacity to fight back with intelligence and strategy. He requested a meeting with Debbie, practically begging through official channels. His assistant reported back that the Eden Collection would consider a meeting in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. She was making him wait, making him sweat, making him understand that she controlled the timeline now, controlled everything. When the meeting finally happened, walking into that conference room felt like walking to his own execution. Debbie sat at the head of the table in a power suit that probably cost more than his car, flanked by lawyers who looked expensive and competent, and a man Donovan recognized from photos, Julian Torres, hotel magnate, someone with more money and better reputation than the Millers could dream of. Torres had his hand on the back of Debbie's chair in a gesture that was either professional or intimate, and Donovan couldn't tell which. The not knowing was its own kind of torture, its own punishment. "Thank you for making time for us," Donovan started, trying to sound professional instead of desperate, trying to maintain some dignity. Debbie's smile was knife-sharp, designed to cut. "We're very busy. You have 20 minutes. Make them count. This hostile takeover—" "Isn't hostile at all," she interrupted smoothly, her voice like silk wrapped around steel. "We're making a fair business offer. Acquire underperforming assets at market value. Your company happens to be in the way of those assets. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" He couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "Debbie, we both know this is absolutely personal." Julian Torres leaned forward, his voice calm and deadly in the way of people who'd never had to raise their voices to be threatening. "Mr. Miller, let me clarify something. This is business. The Eden Collection needs those coastal properties for expansion. You own them. We're offering fair market value for purchase. If you refuse, we complete the takeover and acquire them anyway, along with everything else you own. Your choice is between losing some properties or losing everything. That's not revenge. That's negotiation." Donovan looked at Debbie, searching her face for anything. Anger, satisfaction, some hint of the woman he used to know, some crack in the armor. She gave him nothing, just cool professionalism and the particular disdain reserved for people wasting her time with emotional appeals. "I'll fight this," Donovan said, knowing it sounded pathetic even as he said it, knowing he was grasping at straws. "I have lawyers too, resources. I won't just hand over—" "Then fight," Debbie said simply, standing up and gathering her materials like the meeting was already over. "Lose publicly. Watch your family name destroyed in court battles. Explain to everyone why the woman you abandoned with triplets is now taking your company apart piece by piece. I'm sure that'll be wonderful for business. I'm sure investors will be lining up." She was leaving. Torres followed her lead, and their lawyers did the same. Donovan was left sitting alone at the table, dismissed like he was nothing, like this meeting had been a formality and the decision was already made, which he supposed was exactly the situation. He had no power here. At the door he called out desperately, "Can I at least meet them, my children? Please, Debbie, I just want to know them." She paused, turned back slowly. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or memory of old wounds, or contemplation of whether he deserved any mercy. Then it vanished behind cool professionalism again. "They're not your children, Donovan. They're mine. You signed papers confirming exactly that. Papers you had your lawyers draw up. You gave up all claims to them legally, ethically, morally. You made sure you had no rights and no responsibilities. Congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. I was wrong. Yes, you were, but being wrong doesn't earn you access to their lives. They're happy, they're loved, they're stable. Why would I let you disrupt that balance? For your conscience, for your sudden revelation that maybe children matter. They've lived without you perfectly well for years. They'll continue to live without you for the rest of their lives." Julian Torres spoke quietly, but his voice carried weight. "Let her go, Mr. Miller. You've done enough damage to last several lifetimes." They left. Donovan sat in the empty conference room, surrounded by expensive furniture in a building he was losing, and finally understood what he'd actually done. He hadn't just rejected children. He'd rejected people. Real, actual people who would grow up with his face and his DNA and absolutely no reason to think well of him. He'd created 3 human beings who would only know him as the man who chose not to know them, who actively paid to not know them. His phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer, marked urgent. The leak about his abandoned children had gone viral overnight. Major outlets were picking it up. Social media was destroying him with the particular cruelty of crowdsourced judgment. The headline on his screen read, "Real estate heir has pattern of abandoning children. Multiple women come forward." Multiple? What the hell did that mean? He called his lawyer, hands shaking. What does multiple mean? There's only Debbie. Silence on the line that lasted too long. Then, "You might want to come to my office right now. There's someone here you need to meet. And Donovan, you should probably sit down first." Chapter 6. The Second Bomb. The woman waiting in his lawyer's office looked simultaneously familiar and completely foreign, like seeing someone from a dream in waking life. Rachel. Her name was Rachel. They dated before Debbie, for a few months when he was younger, and somehow even more selfish, more careless. She'd been too intense, he'd thought at the time, too clingy, too interested in building something real when he was interested in building his career. He'd ended things messily, as he ended most things, and hadn't thought about her since. She'd been easily forgotten, easily erased, easily replaced. Next to her sat a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with Donovan's grandmother's eyes and his father's nose, and his family's particular way of tilting her head when curious. The resemblance was unmistakable, damning, impossible to deny or explain away. His lawyer stood in the corner looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else in the world. Rachel looked at Donovan with an expression of pure contempt, mixed with something that might have been satisfaction at finally delivering consequences. "Hello, Donovan," Rachel said with eerie calm. "This is Sage, your daughter, your first abandoned child, though apparently not your last." The words didn't make sense immediately, didn't fit into any reality he'd constructed for himself. His brain tried to reject them, tried to find alternative explanations that didn't involve him being even worse than he'd thought. But there was no alternative. The math worked. The timing worked. The resemblance worked. He'd done this before Debbie, before the triplets, before his engagement to Simone. He'd walked away from a pregnant woman and never looked back, and apparently there had been consequences he'd never bothered to confirm or care about. "I didn't know," he managed to say, which was true but sounded hollow even to his own ears, sounded like exactly what someone would say. "You didn't want to know," Rachel corrected with surgical precision. "I called you when I found out I was pregnant, multiple times. You told me to handle it. You sent money and a message through your assistant saying you weren't interested in being a father, weren't ready for that responsibility. I took your money and left Miami, raised Sage alone in Atlanta, and I was fine with that, better than fine. She's amazing and she's had a good life without you poisoning it." The little girl, Sage, watched him with curious detachment, like he was an interesting stranger but nothing more, nothing that mattered. She had no idea who he was or what this meeting meant. To her, he was just some man her mother was talking to about boring adult things that didn't concern children. "Then why are you here?" Donovan asked, though he suspected he knew the answer, could see it in her eyes. Rachel's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Because I saw the news about you and Debbie Tolan, about her triplets, about your little pattern of getting women pregnant and throwing money at them to disappear like problems you can solve with cash. And I realized Sage deserves to know the truth about her father. Not that he died, which is what I've been telling her because it seemed kinder. The truth, that he chose not to be in her life because he was too selfish and scared and pathetic to be a decent human being." His lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ms. Patterson is considering filing for back child support. Given your financial situation and the public nature of this situation, I'd recommend we negotiate something reasonable before this becomes another media circus." "I don't want his money now," Rachel said, her voice hard. "I wanted it 7 years ago when I was alone and terrified and eating cereal for dinner because formula was expensive and rent was due and I didn't know how I'd survive. Now I have a career. Sage has a good life. I'm here because I want him to know what he's missed. I want him to understand there are 4 children walking around with his DNA who don't know him. I want him to understand that actions have consequences even if you're rich enough to usually avoid them." Sage tugged on Rachel's sleeve, innocent and oblivious. "Mommy, who is this man? Why are we here?" Rachel looked at Donovan, giving him the chance to introduce himself, to claim this child he'd never acknowledged. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. How did he introduce himself? As her father. He wasn't. A father was someone who showed up, who cared, who existed in their child's life as more than biological material. He was a sperm donor. He was a mistake. He was nothing that mattered. Rachel answered for him, voice gentle with her daughter. "This is Donovan, sweetheart. He's someone who knew Mommy a long time ago, just someone from the past." "Oh." Sage lost interest immediately, returning to the coloring book she'd brought, completely unaware she'd just met her biological father. Children that age had no concept of dramatic revelations. To her, this was just another boring adult meeting that had nothing to do with her world. "I want to make this right," Donovan said, though he had no idea what right looked like in this situation, no map for this territory. "Tell me what you need." "I need you to understand that you have 4 children walking around who don't know you," Rachel said, standing and gathering Sage's things with practiced efficiency. 4 kids who deserve better than what you gave them, which was nothing. 4 humans whose lives you affected by choosing not to be affected by them. I'm not interested in your guilt. I'm not interested in your money. I came here to look you in the eye and tell you that you failed my daughter, you failed Debbie's children, and you're going to keep failing because you don't actually know how to be better. You just know how to feel bad about being terrible, which isn't the same thing." She left, Sage holding her hand, completely unaware she'd just met her biological father and would probably never see him again. Donovan stayed sitting, his lawyer hovering awkwardly, the weight of his failures becoming impossible to carry, crushing him slowly. By evening, the story had exploded across social media and news outlets like wildfire. Someone had leaked Rachel's visit, maybe Rachel herself, maybe someone in the lawyer's office, maybe Debbie putting pieces together. The headlines were vicious and accurate. Real estate heir's pattern of abandonment revealed. 2 women, 4 children, 0 accountability. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Business partners demanding explanations. His mother screaming about family reputation. His board calling emergency meetings. Everyone had opinions about his disaster. No one offered help or understanding or forgiveness. He was alone in his mistakes, drowning in consequences. The financial markets responded predictably and brutally. His company's stock dropped significantly. Major investors pulled out entirely, citing moral concerns and risk management. Business partners issued statements distancing themselves from the Miller name. His mother held a press conference where she claimed Donovan had acted without her knowledge or approval, throwing him completely under the bus to save her own reputation, her own social standing. She disowned him publicly, on camera, with the Miller family lawyer standing beside her nodding solemn agreement. Within days, his board removed him from his own company, voted him out unanimously, citing moral failures incompatible with company values and shareholder expectations. The irony was devastating. A company built on generations of Miller ruthlessness was now claiming moral high ground to fire him, to erase him, to throw him away. They offered a minimal severance package and escorted him from the building like a criminal, like someone dangerous. He was 30-something years old and he'd lost everything that defined him. His company, his reputation, his family, his future, his identity, all because he'd made terrible choices and never bothered to face consequences until consequences came looking for him with lawyers and journalists, and 2 women who refused to let him hide anymore. Late at night, alone in his now empty penthouse that felt like a mausoleum, he read articles about Debbie, about how she'd built the Eden collection while raising triplets alone, about her reputation for integrity and excellence, about what a fascinating success story she was. Single mother overcomes abandonment to build empire. She was the hero of a story where he was the villain, and the worst part was she'd earned that narrative. She'd survived him. She'd become someone extraordinary despite him, or maybe because of him. And he'd become exactly what his choices deserved: nothing. He thought about Debbie's words in that conference room, words that kept echoing. "They're mine. You made sure of that." He'd signed papers ensuring he had no legal right to Lauren, Erin, and Mac. He couldn't sue for custody, couldn't demand visitation, couldn't force his way into their lives. He'd built his own cage and locked himself inside, and the key had been thrown away years ago when he chose convenience over children. The only thing he could do now was become someone different. Not for redemption. He didn't deserve that, would never deserve that. Not to win anyone back. That ship had sailed and sunk and was rusting at the bottom of the ocean, but because continuing to be this version of himself was unbearable, was slowly killing him from the inside. He'd have to rebuild from absolute zero, and maybe, eventually, if he worked hard enough, he'd become someone who could look at himself in mirrors without flinching away from what he saw. Chapter 7. The External Threat. Debbie was reviewing quarterly projections that showed the Eden Collection's continued growth when her lawyer called with news that made her blood turn to ice, made everything stop. Rochelle Miller has filed for grandparents' rights in Florida court. She's petitioning for custody of Lauren, Erin, and Mac. "This is serious, Debbie, very serious." The words didn't make sense at first, felt like they were in a foreign language she'd never learned. Then they made too much sense, clicked into terrible focus. Rochelle wasn't interested in the children, had never been interested in them. She was interested in control, in salvaging the Miller name that Donovan had destroyed, in winning a battle her son had already lost. This was about power and optics and public relations, and everything except what was actually best for 3 kids who didn't know her and had no reason to want to. "Can she do this?" Debbie asked, though she knew the answer, could hear it in her lawyer's careful tone. Her lawyer sighed heavily. "She's got resources, excellent lawyers, and technically, she is their biological grandmother. Florida law requires the court to consider her petition seriously. We need to mount a strong defense immediately." Debbie looked at her children playing in the next room through the open door, completely unaware their world was about to become a battlefield. Lauren was helping Erin with a puzzle, being patient in that big sister way. Mac was building something elaborate with blocks, completely focused. They were happy, safe, stable, everything she'd worked herself nearly to death to provide. And now Rochelle Miller wanted to tear all of that apart for her own purposes. The court filings made Debbie physically sick when she read them, made her want to burn things. Rochelle's argument was calculated and vicious, wrapped in concern that was completely false. These children are Millers. They deserve access to their family legacy, proper education, financial security, and the social standing their bloodline affords. The mother, while well-intentioned, cannot provide the level of care and opportunity available through the Miller family resources. This is not about punishing anyone. This is about what's best for the children. It was gaslighting on a legal scale, rewriting history with expensive lawyers. Rochelle had ripped up ultrasound images and called Debbie's children a litter, had called them problems to be eliminated. She'd encouraged Donovan to abandon them. She'd made it crystal clear they were embarrassments to be erased, and now she wanted custody, not out of love, but out of control and image management. The Miller name had been damaged by Donovan's scandals. Having 3 beautiful grandchildren she could parade around at charity events might rehabilitate the family image, might make people forget. Debbie's lawyer was brutally blunt about their situation. "This will be expensive, lengthy, very public, and there's no guarantee we'll win. If Rochelle's lawyers can establish that contact with her would benefit the children financially or socially, the court might grant supervised visitation. From there, she could build a case for more access, potentially even shared custody. She doesn't love them. She's never even met them. This is about control and image. I know, I believe you, but we have to prove that in court. And her lawyers will argue she never had the chance to meet them because you've prevented contact intentionally. They'll paint you as vindictive, using the children as weapons against the Miller family. Debbie felt like she was drowning in a system designed to hurt people like her. Everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed, and now she might lose the only things that actually mattered. She could fight this. She would fight this with everything she had, but fighting meant exposing her children to legal battles and publicity and questions about their father that they weren't ready for, that might damage them. Julian Torres offered to help in ways that went beyond friendship. They'd remained friends after their brief attempt at dating, and he had resources and connections she desperately needed. He suggested something that made strategic sense, but felt fundamentally wrong. Marry me. Make this a stable two-parent household in the court's eyes. It would strengthen your case significantly. She considered it seriously for days. Julian was kind. Her kids liked him. It would solve immediate problems. But Lauren, perceptive as always, wise beyond her years, asked her directly, "Mama, do you love Uncle Julian? Like really love him?" The question hit like a physical blow. Debbie looked at her daughter's serious face and couldn't lie, wouldn't lie. Not the way I should. Not the way that matters for marriage. "Then don't marry him," Lauren said with the moral clarity of childhood. "You teach us not to use people. You say using people is wrong. That would be using him." Out of the mouths of children came wisdom that shamed her completely. She thanked Julian and declined his offer, explained honestly why. If she was going to fight Rochelle, she'd do it on the strength of what she'd actually built: a loving home, a stable life, children who were thriving. If that wasn't enough for the court, then the system was broken, not her family. Depositions were scheduled for the following month. Rochelle's lawyers wanted to question Debbie about everything: her finances, her parenting choices, her personal life, her history with Donovan, anything that could be twisted into ammunition. They'd dig into every choice she'd made, looking for weaknesses to exploit. It was designed to be intimidating, to break her down. It worked. Debbie lay awake at night, terrified she'd say something wrong, something that could be twisted into evidence she was unfit, that her children would be better off with a grandmother who'd never loved them. Then her lawyer suggested something that felt impossible, that felt like asking for help from the devil. If Donovan testified against his mother, it would destroy her case completely. He's lost everything already. Maybe he'd do the right thing finally. He's never done the right thing in his life. People change. Sometimes consequences teach them things they should have known all along. It's worth asking. Debbie spent days avoiding the decision, walking around it like a bomb. Calling Donovan meant acknowledging he existed, meant giving him space in her life again after she'd worked so hard to erase him, meant risking her children's stability on the hope that he'd grown beyond the man who threw money at her and walked away. But Rochelle's lawyers were circling like sharks. Depositions were approaching fast, and she was running out of options and time and hope. Late at night, alone in her kitchen with cold coffee and mounting fear that tasted like metal, she made the call. He answered on the first ring, voice rough, like he'd been sleeping or crying or both, like he was waiting for disaster. "Debbie." Just her name in his voice opened wounds she'd thought were scarred over, thought were healed. She forced herself to speak calmly, coldly, giving nothing away. "Your mother is trying to take my children. If you've ever felt anything, regret, guilt, shame, basic human decency, now's the time to prove it. Help me stop her, or stay the hell out of my life forever." Silence stretched between them for long seconds. She could hear him breathing, could almost feel him processing, deciding what kind of person he wanted to be. Then, "Tell me what you need." She told him everything. Testify against Rochelle. Admit she encouraged the abandonment. Confirm she has no genuine interest in the children's well-being beyond image control. Destroy his mother's case from the inside. It would be public, ugly. It would burn whatever bridge remained between mother and son. But it might save Lauren, Erin, and Mac from being used as pawns in Rochelle's rehabilitation project. "I'll do it," he said without hesitation. "Whatever you need, I'll be there. I'll tell them everything." She didn't thank him, didn't soften, just said, "My lawyer will contact you with details," and ended the call. But her hands were shaking as she set the phone down. She'd asked her worst enemy for help, and he'd said yes. Whether that made him her ally or just someone trying to clear his conscience, she didn't know. She didn't trust it, but she didn't have the luxury of other options right now. Chapter 8. The Alliance. The deposition room felt like a pressure chamber, all sterile surfaces and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly sick, slightly guilty. Donovan sat across from Rochelle's lawyers, his own attorney beside him looking uncomfortable, everyone knowing this was family destruction being committed to record. Debbie watched from the back of the room, her presence both necessary and torture for everyone involved. Rochelle's lead attorney was a shark in an expensive suit, someone whose entire career was built on turning grandmothers into sympathetic victims, regardless of reality. "Mr. Miller, you're aware your mother has filed for grandparents' rights to see Lauren, Erin, and Mac?" "I am." "And you're here to testify against her petition?" "I am." The lawyer paused, clearly hoping Donovan would elaborate, would crack. He didn't. Debbie recognized this version of him, stripped down, defensive, giving away nothing unnecessary. The lawyer tried again, changing tactics. "Can you describe your mother's reaction when she learned Ms. Tolan was pregnant?" Donovan's voice was flat, factual, absolutely damning. "She told Debbie to take money and disappear. She called the babies a litter, like they were animals. She ripped up the ultrasound images and threw them in the trash like they were garbage. She made it crystal clear the children were problems to be eliminated, not family members to be welcomed. She told Debbie that women like her were trash. And she's never attempted contact with these children since their birth? Not to my knowledge. She publicly disowned me when the story became public to protect her own reputation. She's made no effort to meet them, support them, or acknowledge them as family in any way. This petition isn't about wanting a relationship with her grandchildren. It's about controlling the narrative and rehabilitating the Miller name using 3 children she's never cared about as props." The lawyer shifted tactics, trying to paint Donovan as biased, as someone with an axe to grind against his mother, but every question led to more damning answers about Rochelle's cruelty. Yes, she had encouraged the abandonment explicitly. Yes, she'd called Debbie various insulting names designed to diminish her humanity. Yes, she'd made it clear children would be an embarrassment to the family. No, she'd never expressed regret or interest in making amends. No, she'd never asked about the children's well-being. When it was the defense's turn, Debbie's lawyer asked simply, "Mr. Miller, in your professional opinion, based on your entire lifetime of knowing your mother, would contact with Rochelle Miller benefit these children in any way?" Donovan looked directly at Debbie when he answered, something complicated and broken and maybe honest in his expression. "No, my mother is interested in control and image. She's not capable of loving them the way they deserve to be loved. She'd use them as props to fix the family reputation. They'd be accessories, not grandchildren. I've watched her do it my entire life, use people as tools for her purposes. I won't let her do it to them." After the deposition, when lawyers were packing up and officials were filing out, Debbie and Donovan found themselves alone in that sterile room by accident or design. The silence between them was heavy with history, all the words they'd said and hadn't said, all the damage done and not yet repaired, maybe never repairable. "Thank you," she finally said, the words feeling strange in her mouth after years of hatred. She'd spent years hating him. Gratitude felt wrong, felt like betrayal of her own anger. "I should have protected them from the beginning, from her, from me, from my entire toxic family." He looked wrecked, like testifying had cost him something invisible but essential. "Will it be enough to stop her?" "My lawyer thinks so. Your testimony destroys her case. Without evidence of genuine interest in the children's welfare, she has nothing but biology, and biology isn't enough. He nodded, didn't move to leave, seemed to have more to say. "Can I ask you something?" She wanted to say no, wanted to maintain walls that had taken years to build, but he'd just sacrificed his relationship with his mother, complicated and toxic as it was, to protect children he'd never met. She owed him at least listening. "What? Do they ask about me? Ever?" The question was raw vulnerability. Was someone opening themselves to pain? She could lie, could spare him, but she'd never lied to him, even when honesty was brutal, even when truth was a weapon. Mac asked once why he didn't have a dad. "I told him you died before they were born, car accident." It seemed kinder than the truth. Something flickered across his face. Pain, regret, maybe relief that the lie was kind. "Do you ever think about telling them the truth?" "Sometimes, when they're older, when they can understand complexity, when they can understand that people make terrible choices, and sometimes those choices have permanent consequences that can't be fixed. Will you tell them I tried? Eventually? That I fucked up catastrophically, but I tried to fix it even though it's probably too late?" She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw someone who'd been dismantled by consequences, taken apart, piece by piece. He'd lost his company, his family, his reputation, everything he'd built his identity around. What remained was something raw and unfinished, someone who might become better or might just be better at hiding what he was. "I don't know yet," she admitted honestly. "Ask me when they're older. When I can see if you're actually different or just better at seeming different, when I can see if this is real change or just temporary guilt." "Fair." He stood to leave, paused at the door like there was more to say. "The kids, are they happy?" "Very. They're brilliant and funny and kind. They have everything they need." "Good. That's good." He looked like he wanted to say more, but nothing came out. Finally, "I'm going to therapy, trying to figure out why I'm like this, why I keep hurting people. My therapist says I have attachment issues and fear of vulnerability." That's a start. Just a start. Therapy doesn't earn you access to my children, Donovan. It just means you're trying to be less broken. But trying and succeeding are very different things. Lots of people try. Few people succeed. He nodded, accepting the boundary, accepting that he hadn't earned anything yet. "If I keep showing up, if I keep trying, if I become someone genuinely different, would you ever consider letting me meet them? Not as their father, just as someone who exists in their orbit, someone they might know exists." She wanted to say no immediately, wanted to protect them from any risk of abandonment or disappointment or the complexity he represented. But she'd seen him testify. She'd watched him destroy his relationship with his mother to protect children he'd never met, and some small part of her, the part that remembered loving him before everything went wrong, wondered if people could actually change, if damage could actually be repaired. "Ask me in a year," she heard herself say, "if you're still showing up then, still doing the work, still being someone different than who you were. We'll talk about possibilities." A year. He processed this, the weight of 12 months of proving himself settling visibly on his shoulders. "I'll be there, whatever it takes, however long it takes." She gathered her things, ready to leave this sterile room and return to her real life, to her children who needed dinner and homework help. At the door, she paused. "Donovan, thank you. For today, for testifying, for helping stop your mother. The kids don't know it, but you protected them. That matters. It's the least I could do, literally the bare minimum of decent behavior." "Maybe, but you did it. That's more than you've done before. That counts for something, even if it's small." She left. Drove home to her children who were with their nanny, completely unaware their world had just been secured against a threat they never knew existed. Mac was building with blocks. Erin was reading quietly in the corner. Lauren was drawing something elaborate and refusing to explain what it was to anyone. They were perfect and whole and safe. Her phone buzzed with a message from her lawyer. Rochelle's withdrawing the petition. You won. It's over. Debbie closed her eyes, let relief wash through her entire body. She'd won. Her children were safe. Rochelle couldn't use them. And Donovan had actually helped, which complicated everything in ways she wasn't ready to process but couldn't ignore. That was a problem for future Debbie. Present Debbie just needed to hold her children and remember why she fought so hard, remember what actually mattered in this world. Chapter 9. The Unbearable Year. Time moved differently when you were trying to prove you'd fundamentally changed as a person, when every day was a test you might fail. Donovan discovered that days could feel infinite while months disappeared, that progress was invisible until suddenly it wasn't, that becoming someone new required killing off pieces of who you'd been, executing your old self repeatedly. He started therapy twice a week, sitting in an office that smelled like lavender and disappointment, talking to a woman who refused to let him hide behind excuses or money. She made him examine everything, his relationship with his mother, his fear of vulnerability, his pattern of running when things became real, his entitled worldview. It was excruciating. He wanted to quit weekly. He kept showing up because quitting would prove he hadn't changed at all. He'd started a foundation for single mothers, using what was left of his money, using his resources to actually help people, instead of just accumulating more. It wasn't redemption. Nothing could redeem what he'd done, but it was useful, real. He met women who'd been abandoned while pregnant, heard their stories of survival, saw himself reflected in their pain. Every testimony was a mirror showing him who he'd been. He had to look, had to see, had to let it destroy him so he could rebuild differently. Child support for Sage went out monthly now, though Rachel refused additional contact beyond financial. She'd made it clear he was a source of money, not a parent, and she was right. He sent birthday gifts that were thoughtful rather than expensive, trying to show he actually considered what a young girl might want instead of what money could buy. Rachel never acknowledged them. He kept sending them anyway. He attended charity events where he knew Debbie would be, staying in the background, never approaching, but making sure she saw him there, supporting her causes, contributing to her world, not for credit or recognition, but because maybe consistent presence meant something. Maybe showing up again and again proved something words never could. 10 months passed like this. Then one Saturday, he was at a park, not coincidentally but also not obviously stalking, when a soccer ball rolled to his feet. He picked it up, looked around for the owner, and there was Mac. Lauren and Erin stood nearby, watchful and protective like bodyguards. Debbie was further back, on alert, but not intervening yet. "Good game today," Donovan said carefully, handing Mac the ball. Mac studied him with serious eyes that seemed too old for his age. "You come to my games. I've seen you. I do. If that's okay. Mama says you're trying. I am, very hard. Mama says trying isn't the same as succeeding. Your mama is very wise." Lauren and Erin approached, creating a protective circle around their brother. These were his children, and they were studying him like a puzzle they were trying to solve, like a problem with no clear answer. Lauren spoke first, direct and challenging. "Who are you?" Before he could answer, Debbie arrived. "Girls, let's go." But Erin, gentle and curious, asked the question that changed everything. "Mama, is this our biological father?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Debbie looked at Donovan, something complicated passing between them. The year wasn't up yet. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. But her children were asking, and she'd never lied to them about anything that mattered. "Yes," Debbie finally said. "He is." Lauren's eyes narrowed with fierce protectiveness. "Why weren't you there when we were born?" Donovan knelt to their level, making himself smaller, less threatening, more human. "Because I was a coward. I was scared and stupid, and I hurt your mother in ways I can never fix. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. And if you ever want to know me, I'll spend my whole life earning that privilege." Mac's voice was serious, carrying weight. "You hurt Mama?" "Yes, very badly. Then why should we trust you? You shouldn't. Not yet. Trust is earned slowly. I'm working on that. The triplets looked at their mother, seeking guidance. She was crying silently. They moved to her immediately, hugging her, protecting her from the man who'd hurt her. Donovan stayed kneeling, watching his children choose their mother over him, as they should, as was right, as was everything he deserved. After the kids left with their nanny, it was just Debbie and Donovan standing in afternoon sunlight that felt too bright for the moment, too beautiful for the conversation. "The year isn't up yet," she said. "I know, I didn't plan this. The ball just—" "I know." She was quiet for a long moment. "You've changed. I've watched. I've seen you at events, seen the foundation work, heard about therapy. You're different than you were. But I don't know if different is enough. My children are happy, stable. Bringing you into their lives might disrupt that balance we've built." "I understand." "Do you? Because they'll have questions. They'll want consistency. And if you disappear again, I won't." She looked at him with something that might have been hope or fear or both. "You don't know that. Life gets hard. People revert to who they really are under pressure. I've seen it happen. Then test me. Give me the smallest place in their lives. Watch me. If I fail, I'm gone forever. If I succeed, maybe I earn more. One step at a time." Tears were falling now. She didn't wipe them away. "You destroyed me, Donovan. I know. I rebuilt myself into something you could never touch. I know, and I'm in awe of you. Then why do I still feel something when you look at me like that?" The air between them changed, became charged with everything they'd been and might be. He stepped closer. She didn't step back. Years of pain and transformation and undeniable connection collided in the space between them. "Because despite everything I did, some part of you remembers who we were," he said quietly, "and some part of me became who I should have been back then. This is insane. I know. You don't deserve. I know." She kissed him, angry, desperate, confused, years of holding everything in, exploding in one moment. He kissed her back like a man granted one impossible chance, like someone who knew this might be all he ever got. When they broke apart, both shaking, "This doesn't mean—" "I know. You still have to earn them. I know. And I'm not. We're not. I know." She wiped her tears, straightened her spine. "Mac's birthday is next week, Saturday, 2 in the afternoon. You can come. As a guest. Not as his father. Not yet. Just as someone who's trying." His voice broke. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Show up. Bring something thoughtful. Be appropriate. If you make one mistake—" "I won't. I swear on everything." She walked to her car, paused before getting in. "Donovan, you were right about one thing years ago. You weren't ready to be a father then. Maybe you're becoming someone who could be now. Maybe." She drove away, left him standing in the park, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. He sat in his car, hands shaking, touching his lips where she'd kissed him. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't redemption. This was just a crack in the door, and he had to be perfect walking through it. He texted her, "What does Mac like?" Long pause. Then, "Soccer, science, building things. I'll find something perfect." She didn't respond, but she saved the text. At home, watching her children sleep, she whispered, "Please, let me be doing the right thing." Chapter 10. The Earned Beginning. Donovan arrived at Mac's birthday party early. The gift was wrapped carefully, a robotics kit designed for kids, soccer-themed, educational but fun, thoughtful without being overwhelming. He'd spent days researching it. The backyard was decorated with streamers. Other children ran around. Parents clustered in groups. Debbie saw him arrive, gave a small nod. The triplets appeared together. Lauren spoke first. "What's our favorite color?" "I don't know, but I'd love to learn." Erin's turn. "What's Mama's favorite flower?" "I don't remember, but I should." "Mac, can you play soccer?" "Not well, but I'll try if you teach me." When Mac opened the robotics kit, his eyes went wide. "This is amazing. Can we build it?" Donovan looked at Debbie. She nodded slightly. Yeah, maybe, if your mum says it's okay. After the party, Debbie and Donovan stood in the backyard. The evening sun was gentle. You did well today, she said. Thank you for letting me try. Silence. Something was shifting. Debbie. He turned to her. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know, you're the strongest person I've ever met, and I'm sorry I made you do it alone. She was quiet. Do you know what the worst part was? Tell me. Wondering if I imagined what we had, if I meant nothing. You weren't. You aren't. I was just too broken to see it. And now I see clearly, and it's terrifying. She stepped closer. You broke me. I know. I put myself back together. I see that. And now you want in. I want the chance to be present, to prove people can change. She kissed him. This was chosen, intentional. He kissed her back, holding her like she was precious. When they broke apart, this is insane. Completely. You have years of proving ahead. I'll take however long. She pulled back. Lauren has a recital Thursday. Erin has a project. Mac has practice Tuesday. He understood. Can I come? To the recital. Back row. Never. Inside, the triplets watched. Lauren. Is that our dad? Erin. Biologically. Mac. Is Mama letting him stay? Lauren. I think she's giving him a chance. We should too, but make him work. Outside, Donovan asked, What time Thursday? 7. Don't be late. I won't. Ever again. Debbie looked at him. You weren't ready then, but maybe you're becoming the man who could be now. Later, Debbie tucked her children in. They had questions. She answered honestly. Lauren asked, Will you love him again, Mama? Long silence. I don't know. Love isn't about going back. It's about who we're becoming. The last shot. Donovan setting reminders. Lauren recital. Mac practice. He wasn't celebrating. He was preparing. This was just the beginning.